Wonderful story of love. Tell it to me again. Wonderful story of love. Wake the immortal strain. Angels with rapture announce it. Shepherds with wonder receive it. Sinner, oh, won't you believe it? Wonderful story of love. 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 Though you are far away. Wonderful story of love. Still he doth call today. Calling from Calvary's mountain, down from the crystal bright fountain, e'en from the dawn of creation. Wonderful story of love. Wonderful story of love.
So Matthew 5 through 7 is the text that we're covering this time. What is almost always just simply referred to as the Sermon on the Mount. It opens up, when he saw the crowds, he went up on the mountain. And after he sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to teach them, saying, and I'll just stop there. Crowds are there. Now, is this the first teaching that Jesus ever offers? I'll agree with the sentiment. Y'all couldn't hear him. He was shaking his head. We don't know. We don't know for sure. But it's highly unlikely because there are crowds there. Crowds don't come out to listen to someone that they don't know, that they've never heard of. So that gives us some insight into the point of this. Matthew's not suggesting this is the first teaching of Jesus. Matthew is suggesting something else by this record. And so why are we told that he goes up onto the mountain and he sits before the crowds and he teaches them? He says to them. And he starts off with this part of the teaching. Blessed are the. What is unique about this? I think number one, the place is deliberate. I think he goes onto the mountain intentionally because the law of God that Moses brought came from the mountain. And so there's an intent to the place. I believe that the posture is deliberate that he takes. He presents himself as a teacher. I think that he is clearly, in this case, not reacting to questions that are being brought to him. Much of the New Testament shows the teaching of Jesus coming when people come to him with questions. That is not what's going on here. There's crowds, but there's no indication that he's been asked any questions. Instead, he positions himself to instruct. He's establishing instruction, and specifically instruction with the authority of God behind it. So the setting presents him as one who speaks with inherent authority. He's not working off of borrowed authority. Where did Moses get his authority? Straight from God. Moses didn't appeal to other men or to other writings or to what the rabbis say. Moses said, God said. What does Jesus say? He doesn't say God said. He says something even more powerful. I say to you. And that's significant. We'll talk about that in a moment. So he is presenting as one who has authority. not like other teachers. And it does not go unnoticed. Now, verses 3 through 12, which are a whole series of studies on their own. We can't break them down to that extent in this class. We just wanted to hit the highlights. This is what's commonly referred to as what? The Beatitudes. All right, so he basically outlines these characteristics, these attitudes, these postures of those who belong to the kingdom. If you're in the kingdom that he's going to build, this is what you look like. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit. What is poor in spirit? I know what poor in bank is. What is poor in spirit? Okay. That's a big part of it. Recognizing spiritual need and dependence. Recognizing that you are not the master of your destiny. That you need help. And you are reliant upon not just others. There's a lot of people that realize they're relying upon other people. But that you recognize that we're relying upon what? Upon God. Until I realize that I depend upon God, I can't be blessed. But those who understand that they are dependent upon God can be. The second one, blessed are those who mourn. Is he saying it's just a celebratory thing? It's great when you have death all around you in your life and people are dropping like flies and you're just always in a perpetual state of grief? Is that what his point is? No. So what is his point? Those that mourn over something specific. What would that be? Sin. And the effects of sin. Blessed are the meek. That does not mean mousy. Was Jesus mousy? Was he milquetoast? Those are you that might be old enough to remember Casper Milquetoast, the old comic character. He was not milquetoast. He was quite bold. And even in your face at times. You read the scene where he cleans out the temple, you don't get the impression that he was mousy in character. Meekness here does not mean that you don't have a backbone. It means that you're humble. Though he existed in the form of God, he did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself and came in the form of a servant. Does God deserve to have the experience and the limitations of humanity by nature? No. And yet he didn't hold on to that authority and presence and power over creation, but instead came in the form of a servant and actually taught himself, I came not to be served, but to serve and to make my life a ransom. So that meekness, that humility, that is not self-asserting. Again, we talked about this a little bit last week in that comparison with him and Moses. Moses also was identified by God as being what? The meekest who had ever lived. And Jesus is shown to be what? Even more so. And Jesus here teaches folks, if you want to be blessed by God, then this is a character trait that you must have. And so what fruit of the Spirit would parallel with that? Self-control. The ability to control yourself. Just because we can do something, does that mean we should do it? And the answer is no. Sometimes we can do things, but it's not right to do them, and so we should do what? Refrain. Exercise control. And realize my desires and my whims are not the most important thing, but what? God's desires. And then beyond that, even the effect on others around us. Jesus came to this earth and didn't do what was in his personal best interest. Every act, everything that he did, everything that he taught was in the interest of what? Of others. And so all of that control to where we use our life in service to God and in service to our fellow man, rather than in service to self, becomes very important. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. We all know what it means to hunger and thirst. We even know what that means metaphorically, because we know people who hunger and thirst for fame or hunger and thirst for fortune. But he says, no, those are not the things that we ought to have this strong desire to gain. We should have a strong desire for what is right, for the practice of right things. In 1 Corinthians 13, love rejoices in what is good. We should be happy when people around us act in righteous ways. We should want that. Do we always react that way? And the answer is no. Sometimes we cynically question somebody's motives when they do something good. Well, yeah, but Greg, he wasn't doing that for the right reason. No, we should celebrate righteousness in others, and we should strive to be right actors ourselves. Blessed are the merciful. Now, that one's pretty straightforward. To show mercy, to show compassion, to be forgiving. Jesus would teach that in another place. If we're unwilling to forgive others, then what? We will not be forgiven. God will not show mercy upon those who themselves are unwilling to show mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart. What does that mean, pure in heart? Does it mean that you don't have any calcium buildup or cholesterol buildup in your arteries in your heart? No. Those that are inwardly clean, those that have undivided devotion to God, whose hearts are pure. They're holy. That's what the word holy means. Pure. Blessed are the peacemakers. It's talking about guys that go out and negotiate the end of conflicts and wars in the world. Hostage negotiators in local police departments. Is that who he's talking about? What kind of peace are we talking about? Can we do things that make for peace? And the answer is yes. In fact, we have to do things that make for peace if we're Christian. That's okay. So that's part of it, without a doubt. Teaching the gospel, right? Reconciliation with God and reconciliation among ourselves. As far as it lies within you, be at peace with all men. Now, does that mean that peace will always exist? No. But if you're a peacemaker, what does it mean? That when there is a lack of peace, it's not because of you. Now, the interesting part about this relationship is when we're talking about reconciliation with God, the only unfaithful party in that relationship is who? Me. And so, how hard does that make it to strive to be at peace with God? It makes it exceedingly difficult. And it requires us to be humble and to acknowledge when we are wrong. Job was a blameless man. God proclaimed him such. Was Job a faultless man? No, but he was a peacemaker. He was blameless because when he was wrong, he was humble enough to acknowledge that he was wrong and to take corrective actions to sustain fellowship with God rather than lose it. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Not just blessed are the persecuted. There's a lot of people who have a complex in which they are always persecuted. Everything that's said and done is done to harm them. He doesn't say blessed are the persecuted. He said those that are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Now, there is no better example of that than whom? Jesus. Through no fault of his own, he suffered great persecution. He was the epitome of an humble peacemaker who was merciful and who was meek, and yet he still suffered at the hands of men. But it was for righteousness. In fact, if we go back, there's an interesting line that we talked about a few weeks ago when Jesus presented himself to John to be baptized. What was John's response to him? Yeah, I'm not worthy to do this. You should be baptizing me. I'm not even worthy to untie your sandals, is what he would say later. But what was Jesus' response? Suffer it to be so for righteousness' sake. Everything Jesus did was for righteousness. So that right could be modeled and could be known and could be practiced and could be done. So that reconciliation between God and men could be possible. Everything was about that. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. These are not external things. These are inward realities, or they should be inward realities. They're not always realities, but they ought to be. And who is the sole person who controls whether I am poor in spirit, whether I mourn over my sin, whether I am meek, whether I am merciful, whether I'm pure in heart, whether I'm a peacemaker, whether I suffer for righteousness rather than suffer for my evil? What's God's attitude about those who suffer for evil? That's your just reward. What? Who is the only person, literally the only person who controls whether or not these things describe me? Me. Because God, though he has the power to compel, has determined what? To allow us to decide, to allow us to choose. So if I lack poverty of spirit, or if I don't mourn over my sin, or if I'm not meek, or I'm not forgiving or and merciful, if I don't hunger and thirst for righteousness, if I don't have one of these characteristics, I can't blame Leo. I mean, I could. There's a lot of people who do that. They get caught in a sin and they say, well, it's Wesley's fault. Wesley did this. Wesley said that. No. Whose fault is it? It's mine. Did people sin against Jesus? Did Jesus sin in return? So I don't care how poorly Greg treats me. I decide whether or not I'm going to be merciful and gentle and a lover of righteousness in spite of what happens. And that's what he's teaching here. He is teaching them not something contrary to the law. We're going to talk about this more as the class develops. He's not teaching them something. I've heard this expressed before, and it's just wrong. That the old law was all about the external acts, and that it changed to be something different. Do you know what he's teaching here? What the intent of the law of Moses was. The purpose of the law of Moses was to bring people to these characteristics. When he said to them, that they should be merciful, that they should be righteous, and we're studying this we're fixing to study this in our class in Leviticus. When he told them how to respond to sojourners in their land and to foreigners and how they should pursue things, it was all about teaching them the underlying attitudes that were supposed to be there. They just missed it, which, by the way, we do as well. Even though he's gone into more detail with us and said, hey guys, understand, I'm not just talking about the behaviors, I'm talking about your hearts too. He actually went through the trouble of actually expressing that to us, and we still miss it. We still think it's okay for me to not like David as long as I don't actively hurt him. So it's okay for me to want to hit him in the nose as long as I don't hit him in the nose. Well, is that the attitude that I ought to have? And a lot of times we do. We justify it. We say, well, you know what? But I didn't do it. No, but you wanted to. And Jesus deals with that. He says that when you've lusted in your heart for someone, you're just as guilty as when you commit adultery. The next section, verses 13 through 16 of chapter 5, deals with the visible influence of the righteous. You are the salt of the earth. You're the light of the world. The presence of the righteous is to preserve and is to reveal. Interestingly enough, salt has another quality that a lot of people don't realize. Because if you put too much of it out in a field, what happens? It kills everything. You can actually completely ruin a nation. And historically, armies have done that. They've salted the fields behind them. That kills everything and leaves people unable to grow. That is the way we think about salt. But in the proper proportions, do you know what salt does? It actually makes things grow and produce more. And there's that aspect of this when he says you're the salt of the earth, to saying that our job in this world is to make it be preserved and make it to flourish. Righteous individuals' conduct is to be visible, but not to direct attention to ourselves, to instead direct attention where? To God. Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father. Now, there's two things about this. Now, first off, I'm going to say you cannot always control what other people think. There are some people out there who just don't know enough to know who to give glory to. But controlling for that, our behavior and the way that we act and present ourselves makes a difference. And I'll use Moses as an illustration again. I gave you water from the rock. No, you didn't. On top of that, and this was the second time, right? The first time he did exactly what God told him to do and gave God glory. It was the second time God said, speak over the rock. Now, the first time he said, strike the rock. The second time he said, speak over the rock. But what did Moses do? He got irritated at them and he hit it and then said, I gave you the water. And God said, you didn't do what I told you to do, and you took glory unto yourself, and that's not okay. There is a function in which when we do the right thing, we could do it in the wrong way. And he says, let your light shine so that they may see your good works and glorify God. So you do this in a way that God is glorified, not yourself. You don't say, look at what I've done. You say, I'm a servant of God, and I've done only what I've been required to do. Verses 17 through 20, important. Jesus establishes his relationship to the law. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. The law was not set aside. Its purpose was brought to completion. What happens when the purpose of something is fulfilled? It passes away. Only happened one time in my life, and I'm not too old yet, but I'm getting old enough that I can use illustrations like this. Only one time in my life have I seen this happen, but it has happened. And it's been in my time since I've been here in Lafayette. They decided we needed some improvements to the airport, and they didn't have the money to pay for the improvements to the airport. And so the government said, what? There's only one way for government to raise money. It's a tax. That's it. That's the one way for government to raise money. And so they said, we are going to impose a new tax. And they did, a sales tax all over Lafayette Parish, with the stated intent to raise a specific amount of money and to be exercised for a certain amount of time. And then once that goal was accomplished, it was over. And unlike every other time that that's been done, they actually did it. And they actually used the money to do the improvements at the airport. It's really an amazing thing. They did what they said. But that is the way laws work. Now, are there some laws that have a perpetual end? Yeah. Some laws never are finished until there's no more people. Murder will be, non-murder will be in force until there are no more people to murder. But then what happens to that law when the world is no more and there are no more people walking on it? Is there any need for thou shalt not murder? No. There's no one to murder. No way to do it. So even that eventually will pass away. Law of God, the ones that he built for a specific purpose, once that's brought to completion, then it passes away. The ones that are perpetual, they last until when? Until he revokes them. Not even the smallest part of the law was dismissed. The required righteousness on our part, interestingly enough, we're told exceeds that of the Pharisees, the people who are most careful, at least of the small things in the law. He says your righteousness has to exceed theirs. It's not that the law has been set aside, and that's the mindset that a lot of people have today. Oh, we've got this freedom in Christ, and we don't have to worry about law keeping anymore. We're going to be saved by grace, and we don't have to do anything. No, we still have to practice righteousness. And if we don't love and pursue righteousness, then we can't be blessed. That's what he just said in the Beatitudes, right? Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. You're looking at it the wrong way if you think that the law has been removed. The Mosaic law was fulfilled. It accomplished the purpose that it was sent to do, and it was no longer, therefore, the ruling thing. What Jesus did in the next verses, starting in 21 and going through 48, is this series of, but I tell you. You have heard that it was said, but I say to you. Was he saying, Moses said this, and he was wrong, let me tell you? No, that's not what he's saying at all. He says, you've heard about anger and murder. Let me explain to you what the real threshold is, because you're stopping short of the real threshold. You've heard about adultery. Let me tell you about lust. You've heard about divorce. Let me tell you what God's intent from the beginning was. You've heard about oaths. Let me tell you about how honest you need to be. If you say yes, then you must mean yes. It doesn't take some kind of oath to God or swearing on a Bible to get you to tell the truth. Let me tell you about retaliation. Let me tell you about loving your enemies. You've heard that it was said to love your neighbor. Love your enemies. Love those who persecute you. And the movement is very consistent from the focus on the outward to the focus on the inward condition. Listen, you get the inward condition fixed, the outward takes care of itself. If I love my enemy, then I'm not going to mistreat them. Love covers a multitude of sin. If I don't lust for those that I have no right to be with, adultery is not a problem. I'm not going to commit it. If I don't hate, I'm not going to murder. From minimum compliance to complete righteousness. That's what he's teaching here. Don't just try to comply. Try to be the embodiment of the commands of God, of the righteousness of God. Jesus doesn't merely restate the law. You know what he does? He explains the full demand of the law. This is what God was actually requiring. You've misunderstood what he was requiring of you. And then he gets into chapter 6, and I've got 3 minutes left, so we're probably going to have to cover part of this next time. Righteousness is directed toward God, not men. Jesus warns against practicing your righteousness for human recognition. Don't just do the right thing because somebody's watching you, or because you want to be seen, or because you want to get credit. And so he uses 3 different things: giving and prayer and fasting as examples. Don't give to have someone go, wow, what a generous guy. If that's what you're looking for, then when you hear someone say to it, you just got everything you're going to get from it. I'm going to tell you, I don't think there's a local congregation on the planet, if you showed up with a $10 million check and put it in the collection plate, that wouldn't accept it. I'm just going to tell you up front. Even if you brought in one of those big jumbo checks and somebody with a camera to take a picture of you presenting it, I think they'd probably still take it. But I'm going to also tell you this, God will not be impressed when you bring in the big jumbo check and get a picture. God be eminently impressed if you give the $5 that you actually have and you do it quietly because you care and you want to contribute and help and please Him. Prayer is the same thing. You get the opportunity to lead a public prayer maybe. And maybe this is important to you and you want to sound good, so you rehearse and you practice and you write out and you memorize. And all the people come swarming around you. Whoa, what a beautiful prayer. I just love the way you pray. It's just so beautiful and so moving. He said, if you're praying to be heard by men, well, enjoy the accolades because that's what you receive. You know what God cares about? Your heart. Fasting is the same thing. He said, basically, when you fast, wash your face and comb your hair and put on some clean clothes and don't walk around going, I haven't had anything to eat in 2 days. I'm fasting to the Lord. Your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Doesn't matter if not a single person on the planet knows what you're doing. God doesn't miss it if it's genuine and real and heartfelt and righteous. The issue is not the act, but the intention behind the act is what He's concerned with. All right. Now, I got to say something real quick before I stop. That doesn't mean that the act, when it's a righteous act that's been commanded, isn't important. The act needs to be carried out. You can't just have a good attitude and say, well, if I was to do this, I'd have the right attitude about it. You do have to do it. But even if you do it, if the attitude's wrong, it doesn't matter. We'll pick up in the middle part of chapter 6 next time, if I remember, and move from there. I appreciate everybody's presence and attention and participation this morning.
Wonderful story of love, tell it to me again. Wonderful story of love, wake the immortal strain. Angels with rapture announce it, shepherds with wonder receive it. Sinner, oh, won't you believe it? Wonderful story of love.